91%. By August 1945, that's how many Japanese carrier crewmen were dead. Not wounded, dead. Out of every 100 who served aboard the Imperial Navy's flattops, only 9 made it through. They began the war with 10 fleet carriers and finished with none. Here's how an entire sea service bled itself out by arithmetic. The war opened with Japan fielding the finest carrier aviators on Earth. Typical trainees logged more than 800 flight hours before combat. By 1944, replacements arrived with fewer than 50. The root cause was a catastrophic policy choice. Veterans were not cycled home to instruct. Experienced pilots stayed at the front until they were shot down, and one by one, they were. Now, the numbers. At Midway, 4 carriers and 322 aircraft were lost. The mortal blow, though, was the 110 veteran aviators killed, each representing over 2 years of training. Japan's pipeline could turn out roughly 200 new pilots a month. The United States was producing about 2,500. Run the totals. Japan was mortally wounded long before it admitted it. The ships themselves compounded the tragedy. Japanese doctrine prized offensive spirit as a cure for material shortcomings. Damage control training lagged or was ignored. Albert U.'s carriers sent crews to firefighting schools. Too often, Japanese crews were left with little more than hoses and buckets. When Taiho took a single torpedo, the ventilation was left running. Aviation fuel vapors coursed through the hull. 6 hours later, a spark transformed the ship into a 27,000-ton charge. A Shokaku survivor remembered the moment the American dive bombers arrived out of the sun. 3 bombs. That was enough. In barely 20 minutes, the carrier was finished. About 360 men died. Oil burned on the sea. Sailors who leapt clear were caught in the flames. There's another set of figures most overlooked. Japanese carriers crammed aircraft into every available space. Hangars, flight deck, passageways. Akagi carried 91 planes in spaces designed for 60. So when a single bomb punched into a hangar, it didn't kill 1 airplane, it took out 20. The chain detonations of fueled, armed aircraft turned hangars into crematoria. Doctrine magnified the risk. The Japanese armed and fueled aircraft inside enclosed hangars. The Americans did that work on the open deck. 1 bomb into a Japanese hangar meant nearly every plane detonated within a confined box. At Midway, Kaga absorbed 4 bombs. In 9 minutes, 711 men were dead. Survivors said the hangar became a blast furnace, fed by rivers of aviation gasoline. Then there was gunnery. Until 1944, Japanese carriers lacked radar-directed anti-aircraft fire. Crews tried to lead 400-mile-per-hour attackers with manual sights. Expected hit rates hovered around 2%. American carriers, using radar to aim, pushed probabilities toward 18%. That isn't a fair fight. It's a suicide pact enforced by math. Strategically, the industrial gap closed the coffin. After Midway, Japan had 6 fleet carriers remaining. Over the next 2 years, they managed to build 7 more. The United States rolled out 90. Not a misprint. 90. In 1944 alone, Japan commissioned 1 new fleet carrier. America launched 19. Human fervor was pitted against factories. Factories won. Pilot training collapsed in step. By 1944, American naval aviators averaged about 300 flight hours, roughly a third of that in frontline types. Japanese trainees often scraped together 30 hours total, many of them in gliders to save fuel. Plenty could barely trap on a calm day, let alone in battle. At the Philippine Sea, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, Japan lost 3 carriers and roughly 400 aircraft. The grimmer statistic was aircrew, about 450 pilots gone, with only 43 recovered. The U.S. tally was 29 aircraft lost. The kill ratio ran about 13-1. That's not a contest, it's an execution. One captured Japanese naval officer later admitted what many already knew. After Midway, replacement pilots could not be generated in time. Every subsequent carrier sortie was, in effect, a suicide mission. They just hadn't named it that yet. Consider Shinano. At 72,000 tons, she was the largest carrier ever completed to that point. And she sank on her maiden voyage after 4 torpedoes from a single submarine. About 1,135 men died. Damage control teams didn't know their gear. Watertight doors were left open. The pride of the fleet went under because crews hadn't been taught the basics. By 1945, the last carriers were conversions of battleships in liners. The available aviators often lacked the skill to land aboard. These decks became one-way launch pads for kamikaze strikes. The crew's mission was to steam into range and accept annihilation. Survival wasn't an objective. The end came with bitter symmetry. The final operational carrier, Amagi, was wrecked at anchor by American air attack. Her crew remained aboard, waiting for aircraft that would never arrive, for pilots who no longer existed, fighting a war already lost. Here is the bleakest tally. Japan began with roughly 3,500 trained carrier pilots. By the surrender, about 112 were still alive. The carriers that had transformed naval warfare became steel tombs for roughly 25,000 sailors who believed fighting spirit could defy arithmetic. The Japanese carrier arm didn't merely lose, it performed industrial seppuku, and it took 91% of its men with it.